Borderlands 2, the internet's favorite sequel. I had actually bought it all the way back in January 2014, but for whatever reason I never really played it past the opening area. A whole decade later, after finally completing the first game earlier this year, it was time for me to experience the masterpiece that is Borderlands 2. The game starts with a bit of recap from the previous game as well as some new lore. After opening the vault, we found out that there was no treasure and it was actually some kind of freaky space prison. What we didn't know at the time though is that opening the vault would also trigger a reaction across Pandora that would awaken a new, highly sought after element called Iridium. With the sudden appearance of Iridium on Pandora, scummy corps like Hyperion started invading the planet in the name of mining every last piece of Iridium they could get their hands on. During those mining expeditions, the leader of Hyperion, Handsome Jack, discovered a second, much cooler vault. With tales of the new vault spreading, a new generation of vault hunters set out to find the key again and stop Jack from seizing control of the mysterious alien powers hidden behind the vault. I decided to go with Maya for this playthrough. Zero looked the coolest personally, but he kinda looked similar to Mordecai from the last game in terms of playstyle and proficiencies, and I was looking to mix it up. After a surprisingly non-lethal train explosion, we wake up on a big frozen glacier greeted by our old friend Claptrap. Speaking of old friends though, we also see the return of the voices in my head, once again helping us in our quest to find the vault. Following Claptrap back to his bachelor pad, he pretty much immediately gets attacked by a big local badass bullymong named Knuckledragger, who ends up stealing his eye and jumping away. According to the voices in my head, I would need to help the little guy out so he can get me to my next destination, which would be Sanctuary. Sanctuary was previously closed off to us in the first game, so it was really exciting to finally get to go there. Not long after leaving Claptrap's house, we managed to catch up to Knuckledragger, now wearing his best Doctor Strange cosplay. Unfortunately for him though, I needed that time stone, so making sure to really focus on hitting those criticals, I beat my first badass and recovered Claptrap's eye. From there we made our way over to Liarsburg to meet Hammerlock, who helped reattach old Clappy's eye. Now I wasn't going for any kind of completionist run or anything, but like the last game, I'm trying to at least do all the side quests that I could complete, so before moving on to the next area I made sure to wrap up the side quests given by Hammerlock. Cleared out some of the bullymongs living nearby, restored power to a vending machine so that I could buy a shield, collected some bullymong hair for Hammerlock, and finally made my way to Blackburn Cove to beat the bullymong rider. This symbiosis side quest was the first proper quest I had that involved me clearing an area of enemies to make my way to a boss at the end. So it was during this section where I was really getting used to the combat and noticing the differences from the first game. The combat felt a lot smoother and less clunky, not to mention that the weapon accuracy wasn't a complete nightmare like it was at the start of Borderlands 1, so I was having a great time fighting my way through this area of bandits. The Mitchbog fight itself wasn't too bad. I was able to deal with Mitch half pretty quick right at the gate. Unable to go on without his other half, Mong jumped away to this balcony where he accepted his fate, so all I had to do was hit him with 3 quick crits from the sniper Hammerlock gave me, and it was over. I still had the Handsome Jack here side quest left to do in the area, but I started the main mission to escort Claptrap to the ship, so I decided that I would come back to it. On the way to Flint's ship, we encountered Boom Boom. Making sure to stay behind cover as much as possible to avoid their explosions, the fight went by fairly problem-free. Throughout this mission in the background, Claptrap would explain a bit about his history with Captain Flint. They used to have a deal where Claptrap would supply Flint with the loot he finds on the bodies that Jack dumped on the glacier, and in return Flint wouldn't torture Claptrap, but he often would anyway. Claptrap went along with this for a good while, you know, because the implications, but eventually he started a mutiny and escaped. After fighting my way to the top and raising the elevator for old Claptrap, I was finally ready to fight old Captain Flint. By the way, is there any relation to Baron Flint from the first game, or just a coincidence? Anyway, the fight with the captain was pretty interesting. He was tanky and immune to headshots, but worst of all, his arena was filled with other enemies. My strategy was to get rid of as many as the small fries as I could at the start and loop Flint around this pillar at the far back right of the ship, where I was able to avoid most of the damage and dish some back out for a bit. Eventually the smaller enemies as well as Flint started crowding the area, so I ran out, got downed, caught a second wind, and finally finished Flint off. After looting the area clean and turning in the quest, it was finally time to set sail for Sanctuary. Except, not really. At the gate to Sanctuary, I speak with Roland, one of the 4 playable characters from the first game, now the leader of the resistance against Jack, the Crimson Raiders. Roland tells me that I can earn my entry into Sanctuary by tracking down Corporal Reese, one of the Crimson Raider members who hasn't returned back to base yet. Worse yet, Reese held with him a power core needed in order to keep the Sanctuary shields up. Unfortunately, Reese didn't make it in the end, but with his final breath he let us know that it was a psycho from the Bloodshots who stole the power core from him, and that I need to get it back or else Sanctuary would remain defenseless. So, in honor of Corporal Reese, I made my way over to the bandit camp and eventually defeated all the Bloodshots in the area, making sure to snag that optional objective as well and reclaim the power core for Sanctuary. After finally gaining access to Sanctuary, it's revealed that Roland's comms went down while he was out on a mission and he's been MIA ever since. Before leaving to find Roland, I made sure to plug in that new power core and restore the shields, right on time as well because shortly after Sanctuary was hit with a quick little airstrike. Our old pal Scooter said that were Roland ever to go missing, that Plan B would be making the city float, but unfortunately Scooter's tech isn't quite up to stuff yet, so we weren't able to pull that off. Before pivoting to Plan C, I made sure to circle back to my last side quest I left behind in the Southern Shelf. During Handsome Jack here, we find out what happened to Helena Pierce from the previous game. The tapes we find recount the events from when Jack sieged New Haven, where Helena met an untimely end at his hand. This is actually super sad to hear at the time, because I did like her character from the first one, but it's good that the game establishes that no one's safe early on, because boy do they get trigger happy down the road. Plan C. Head over to Roland's house where he apparently left a message for us, which in retrospect really should have come before Plan B. The note that we find in Roland's vault is a message from someone named the Firehawk, saying that if we don't go to Frostburn Canyon, people would end up dead. With a note like that, it's assumed that the Firehawk captured Roland and is holding him captive, so I start getting ready to make my way over to Frostburn. Before leaving, I quickly got the rundown on the new elemental modifier called Slag. Any enemy who's slagged will take additional damage. This is a pretty handy weapon ability, and I do use it a few times, but admittedly I don't utilize it as well as I probably could have throughout this playthrough. I also visited the good Dr. Z. He needed some help performing a very delicate operation, so with the most precise, careful, well-timed jab I've ever thrown, I managed to make a small incision just below the patient's sternum and extracted an iridium shard. I gave the iridium shard over to our old pal Patricia Tanis. On my way to Frostburn, I knocked out some quick side quests as well. Killed some boner farts for Hammerlock, found Doc Mercy's mysterious weapon, got the Happy Pig Motel back up and running, and finally did my first timed quest from the Happy Pig bounty board. There's a couple of these timed quests in the game. This one specifically wasn't too bad, but the others can be a bit of a pain, unfortunately. Outside of the timed quests, one of the other big changes from the first game is that in order to upgrade max ammo, you need iridium instead of the basic currency. So it took a lot longer to build those numbers up, so for most of the early game and some of the mid game, ammo was a big problem. Lucky for me, Doc Mercy dropped a second gun as well that had infinite ammo. I relied on this pistol for a good while. It did pretty low damage, but the fact that you could continuously shoot it without reloading made it a good DPS option for a bit. Once at Frostburn Canyon, it's revealed that the Bloodshots are having some kind of turf war with the Firehawk, so I'd need to fight my way through a few areas of bandits first. This section was the first time I encountered one of the new enemy types in this game, the Goliath. Of course, being totally ignorant to the fact that you shouldn't be aiming for headshots with him, I domed the first one I saw. It was honestly a little terrifying watching him slowly run straight towards me, especially because I kept missing my shots since their actual head was a much smaller target. Eventually, reaching the end, we finally meet the Firehawk, which is revealed to be none other than our Siren counterpart from the first game, Lilith. Lilith explains that she didn't kidnap Roland and that she's actually part of the Criminal Raiders as well. While Roland worked to take down Jack, Lilith has been behind the scenes keeping the bandits in check so that Roland can focus on the endgame. It's also revealed that Lilith consumes iridium in order to harness and grow her siren powers more, which is pretty cool. Hopefully we can see Maya do the same thing in the next game, and it'll be interesting to see how her powers evolve more. Our conversation with Lilith ends up getting cut short though, when a group of Bloodshots blow up the ceiling and start pouring in. With Lilith's siren powers and my infinite gun, we're able to make short work of the intruders. The only real challenge during this fight was the badass Psycho, but I found an elevated spot where they looked like they couldn't reach me, so I was able to crit them pretty safely. After grinding out some newly unlocked side quests, it was getting to be about time that I rescued Roland. So next I went over to the Bloodshot stronghold to finally break him out, except that once I reached the main gate, we realized that it's way too fortified for me to get in. So Scooter recommends that I go find his sister Ellie, who can set me up with one of their bandit vehicles so that we can trick them into giving me access to the stronghold. Ellie is situated in an area called the Dust, which is mostly bandit occupied, so outside of Ellie's garage there's quite a few enemies roaming around this area. including my first look at the new vehicle enemy type, the buzzards. I saw that there was a buzzard-related side quest available in Ellie's garage, so I decided to do that first. Ex-pilot Loggins was kicked out from his flight squad here in the dust because he was from a town that outlawed dancing and they just weren't having that, so he asked me to enact his revenge by destroying the volleyball court in the buzzard camp. The buzzard camp was completely walled off, so feeling the need for speed, I ramped off a nearby cliffside into the camp. Once in, it was just a matter of confiscating the camp's volleyballs and finding some jet fuel to use as an accelerant, all the while making sure not to get killed by the camp residents. Fighting wasn't too bad here. The area did have a lot of buzzards and Goliaths, which were really the only problem areas, since I was still mostly relying on the infinite pistol, which was slowly but surely becoming less and less useful, so I tried my best to mix it up with other guns I found or had on me in this area. Eventually, after clearing out the camp and finding all the items, I doused the net in jet fuel and watched it go up in flames. Destroying the volleyball court was enough to draw out the pilots directly responsible for kicking out Loggins, so I quickly dealt with them and finished off the mission. With that out of the way, I went back to start looking for those parts for the bandit vehicle so that I could get back to rescuing Roland. This part was nice and quick since there were so many vehicles driving around in the dust. All I had to do was quickly blow them up and grab what I needed. I took the components back to Ellie and she fitted them into our new car. Having another option in the catch-a-ride is pretty awesome, but I personally prefer the offensive strength of the light runner, so outside of a few instances I mostly only use the runner. Hopefully one of the other games will have more than 2 vehicle options, which would be pretty cool. With the new truck, the bandits couldn't tell it was us and lowered the front gate wide open, though it didn't take long before they realized. Once through the gate, there was a quick mini-boss fight with Bad Ma. Bad Ma is basically just like any standard shield enemy, but he's got a bunch of little guys taped up to the front of the shield. Thankfully, I had a corrosive sniper on me here, so I was able to get a nice bit of damage in despite the shield. Bad Ma had on him a key to the bridge, so I grabbed that, lowered the drawbridge, and finally entered the stronghold. Thanks to keeping up to date with side quests, I was slightly stronger than the enemies on this mission, so I wasn't struggling too much. There's quite a few rooms with a good bit of enemies to fight through though, so getting through the area did take a fair bit of time. While you're fighting through the rooms, we periodically hear Flanksteak, the Bloodshot's leader, over the echo. It's revealed through these short bits of dialogue that Hyperion doesn't seem to want to negotiate with the Bloodshots for Roland. Lilith mentions that Hyperion might not want to pay for Roland, but they definitely want him, so it's most likely that they're scheming something as well. After a bit, I finally make it to the prisoner holding room, and who's that in the cell all the way at the back of the room? None other than Roland himself. About time we met. Unfortunately though, our meeting was cut short. Moments after saying hi, Hyperion robots break through the wall behind him and start trying to abduct him. Thus begins the second half of this quest, rescue Roland from Hyperion. This was my first introduction to the robot enemy types. I was actually struggling with this mission probably more than I should have. This being my first encounter with these enemy types, I didn't realize that their shoulder joints were also weak spots, so I wasn't getting as many crits as I normally try to. In addition to that, I was also a little underprepared in the weapon department. The only corrosive weapon I had on me was my sniper, which I felt was a little bit of a waste to use on the small guys. Eventually, I made it to the constructor fight. This fight was a little overwhelming at first because the constructor was just spawning other robots constantly, and I was focusing too much on clearing the field before I did any damage to the constructor itself. After a minute or two of that, I gave in to Roland's constant yelling to lower the constructor's shields, and just started firing away with the infinite pistol. This turned out to be the right move because within a couple of seconds the shields were gone and the constructor was dead. By the way, I didn't realize this when I was playing this bit, but watching the clip back, the arena we fight in is a huge shrine for Marcus that the bandits said they wanted to build over that echo we found back down below in the dam. Pretty cool. I didn't really give that echo any thought originally.
Marcus is a god. Me and the boys got an idea. A good idea. You see, a great idea. We built him a shrine. Big shrine, beautiful shrine.
Regrouping with the raiders back at Sanctuary, Roland reveals that he has some intel on the vault. Turns out it isn't an alien prison or treasures, but actually a living thing. It said that whoever opens the vault gains total control over this Iridium warrior. This of course would be devastating news if Jack were to get his hands on it. However, if the raiders could get there first, then we could wipe Hyperion off the map. One small problem though, in order to pivot to a plan like this, we would need the vault key. Turns out that the vault key needs to be charged with Iridium, which is why Jack has been mining for it so relentlessly across Pandora. Our best bet in tracking down the key would be one of Roland's spies out in the Tundra Express. Before heading over to the Tundra Express, we had to double back to the Bloodshot stronghold for a side quest there. Patricia Tanis gave us a quest called Splinter Group. Apparently a bunch of Teenage Mutant experiments broke out of a lab and we needed to go track them down and get rid of them. Fighting our way down to the sewer, we finally made it to their lair. Using pizza as bait, we lure out these mutants and begun our fight. The way they were disappearing and reappearing, it was clear these mutants were experienced ninjas. Lucky for me, I was no chump like the Foot and was able to eventually overpower them and win. Admittedly, this next room had me stumped a bit. There was some kind of sequence puzzle here and I just couldn't really figure it out, so I ended up googling it. But all it really did was summon the mutant's dad, Flinter, who I of course had to send to see his sons. With that out of the way, I made my way over to the Tundra Express. I lit a few varkets on fire to wake up Roland's spy, who's revealed to be none other than us from a previous life, Mordecai and Bloodwing. Mordecai tells us that he has intel that the vault key is going to be aboard a train passing through the area later, which means it's time for a train heist. Roland mentions that he knows a great demolitions expert in the area named Tina, so I'll need to get her to help with the explosives. Once I find her house, Tina, who's apparently a child, says that she's willing to help. She's got these friends Mushy Snugglebites and Felicia Sexopants, who can definitely stop the train, but some bandits had stolen their badonkadonks a few days ago, so I'll need to get them back first. After getting too curious about a button and almost burning myself alive, I made it to the bandit camp. The badonkadonks are fairly close together, so I entered the camp at the closest point that I could and went straight for them. I returned back to Tina with both badonkadonks in hand to finally restore Mushy Snugglebites and Felicia Sexopants to their former glory. Before starting the heist, I made sure to also do Tina's Tea Party side quest to get her cool corrosive pistol, which I ended up using for a fair bit with how much damage it would do to the Hyperion bots. It was finally time to go do the heist itself. I set up Tina's gals and launched the badonkadonk straight at the train. The enemies up by the wreck were all Hyperion bots, which was perfect because I got to test out Tina's pistol, and boy did it cut through them like butter. Luckily, this would make what comes next even easier too. Roland mentions that he suspects that the key would be in the most fortified train car, so fighting my way until what looks to be the most fortified car, I encounter someone that's been hinted at pretty much since the start of the game, Wilhelm. Or how worried the voice in my head seemed to be about Wilhelm. His boss fight honestly wasn't too bad. With the new pistol and hitting crits, I was eating through his health bar pretty quick. He also didn't seem to fight back against me much. Got a couple of hits in at the start, but then just started running around destroying the other train cars to spawn the smaller guys. After a bit of blindly firing away at him, he went down, dropping a powerful energy core, like the one that we got at the start to keep Sanctuary's shields up. The vault key ended up not being there, but we weren't leaving empty-handed. Roland and the voice in my head tell us that a core like this could power the shields for at least a few years. Before heading back to Sanctuary to plug in the new core, I was doing a few more side quests in the Tundra and ended up getting stuck for a good bit while doing the Mine All Mine quest. The first requirement of this quest is to kill 10 enemies and then advance to the next area above, where we face off against the boss prospector Zeke. The problem was, once I beat the 10 enemies I needed, I couldn't find out how to advance to the next area of the mine. I thought I was on the right track with jumping on these conveyor belts, but the belts would just shoot me off at high speeds if I tried jumping on them, so I gaslit myself into thinking I must have been wrong. Eventually, I finally gave it a Google, and from the video I watched, it looked like I was right and needed to jump on those belts, but it wasn't shooting the guy backwards like it was for me. One of the comments mentioned it was a bug caused by my FPS, so I tried lowering my max FPS from unlimited down to a capped 50, and lo and behold, it worked. Surprised after all these years that hasn't been patched out or something. With the quest in the Tundra over, all that was left to do was plug in our new shield energy core. What could go wrong, right? Well, apparently everything. As soon as I plugged in the new core, it's revealed that the voice in my head that the games haven't brought up until now was actually someone working for Jack. Their name was also apparently Angel. I'm not sure if that's ever mentioned at any point prior to this section. With the trapped power core now in the shield generator, Angel has full authority to drop Sanctuary shields as she pleases. Jack follows this up by raining down an airstrike on Sanctuary at the same time. Running through town, witnessing the chaos as I run past, we hear Lilith over the comms mention that she's got some kind of plan. Step 1 would be getting Sanctuary in the sky like we planned earlier in the game. Helping out Scooter, I head over to the center of town where he asks us to flip some switches, officially getting the city primed and ready to fly. Step 2 is getting some iridium to Lilith. Roland was originally working on step 2, but he ended up getting pinned under some rubble, so I'll need to bring the iridium over to Lilith. While heading over to Roland, Jack mentions that this was his plan all along. When the original gang opened up the vault in the first game, it was because Angel helped them to do so. Also that the iridium would spread throughout Pandora so that they could charge the second key for the vault. It's kinda crazy no one was suspicious. Anyways, with the iridium Lilith needed now in hand, I quickly run over and give it to her. With the added power, she starts prepping and puts the plan in motion. Fortunately, during all this, she accidentally teleports me outside the city, but at least I got a good view of it all going down. First, the city starts flying. Hovering up in the air, though, is still taking quite a few shots, and that's where Lilith came into play. As soon as the city was in the sky, she used her teleporting powers and moved the whole city. A plan Patrick would be proud of, I'm sure. Once things calmed down a bit, Angel got back in touch with us, pleading for us to trust her despite what just happened. She tells us that if we head over to the Highlands by way of the fridge, we'll most likely end up finding sanctuary there. Not really having many options, I reluctantly listened to Angel and made my way over to the fridge. Heading down into the fridge, I'll need to fight off a few areas of enemies on my way. These were mostly just rats and racks, so it wasn't too bad. During all this, Angel's also explaining a bit more about her current circumstances and how she's sick of manipulating people for Jack. Once we fight our way to the end of the fridge, Angel also mentions that she knows where the key really is and that it's been with her this whole time. With all that just went down, I am a bit skeptical, but I got the impression that she could probably be trusted. She did just betray us, but knowing Jack's personality, I was sure there was more to it. After doing some running around to get the fast travel linked back up to Sanctuary, I regroup with the raiders and start planning our next move. Angel shares with the rest of the group that she's had the vault key with her this whole time and has a plan for how we can get it. The raiders seem reluctant to listen to Angel again, rightfully so after her betrayal, but end up giving her a second chance as well. It's revealed that the key is held at a facility in a place called 1,000 Cuts, but the facility has 3 layers of security that we're going to need to go through. The first is an energy gate that'll destroy any non-Hyperion entity that passes through it. Second is a defense bunker outfitted with high-tech, state-of-the-art weapons. And lastly, the final hurdle is a door at the very end that'll only open for Jack. Angel also ominously mentions that no matter what, we can't let Lilith into her chamber, but we don't really get more info on that for now. With all that said and done, it looks like we have a plan. Roland mentions that he's got an idea for the first layer of security, and that I'll need to go to a place called the Wildlife Preserve. The idea is that with the proper Hyperion upgrade, Claptrap should be able to be modified so that he can pass through the energy gate death wall no problem, and thankfully Mordecai has the upgrade we need. Embracing my Firehawk cult roots, I burn myself on this campfire and rendezvous with Mordecai at the top of this perch at the wildlife outskirts. He reveals to us that he had been keeping the upgrade we need on Bloodwing, who was captured by Jack and his Hyperion goons. That being said, this officially turns into a rescue mission. Bloodwing being a companion of mine from a previous life as well, we also could not let this stand, so I quickly made my way over to the preservation. Past the front gate, we fight a lot of loaders and other varieties of robots. At this point, I for the most part knew how to deal with them, so it was relatively struggle-free. From there we drop down into the animal holding area where our enemy types switch up to skags and stalkers. The skags weren't too bad of an issue. There was an occasional badass skag that would be around somewhere, but I more or less managed to stay alive, and the stalkers weren't any more annoying than they usually are. The only real notable occurrence of either was the unique stalker-skag pairing of Pamon and Tumba. Their fight wasn't too bad, thankfully. Tumba went down pretty easily, and I killed Pamon not long after. I guess thanks to their problem-free philosophy, they'll be worry-free for the rest of their days. This quest also had an optional objective to grab some slag samples from the labs as I passed through the rooms. Plus I also had a side quest from Patricia called Doctor's Orders, where I would need to grab some of the slag research notes from the labs as well. This was a pretty straightforward side quest fortunately. I just needed to pay attention to the rooms as I passed through them and make sure I'm grabbing everything I needed before moving on. After about 45 minutes of fighting my way through the preservation, I finally made it to the final area. Depending on know where Bloodwing is, Jack finally shows us. Raising the elevator, it's revealed that he used some of his iridium experiments on Bloodwing, who was now as big as a constructor robot. For whatever reason, these experiments also affected Bloodwing's mind, because she wasn't listening to Mordecai anymore. Left with no other choice, we're forced to fight our old pal. The fight with Bloodwing was more difficult emotionally than it was physically, probably thanks to my slight level advantage from grinding out all the side quests prior. Every now and then Jack would call out a different element that Bloodwing would then gain the affinity for. This would also make the weapons of those element types useless against him, so I decided to just stick with a no element to save me the trouble from switching constantly. Blasting away with a revolver every time Bloodwing dive-bombed, I managed to get most of our health gone within the first couple minutes of the fight. After eventually lowering our health enough, Mordecai loads up a trank round and puts Bloodwing to sleep. Squeamish look away because our victory didn't last for long. As soon as Bloodwing was down for the count, Jack detonated an explosive collar, killing Bloodwing right in front of us and Mordecai. I think this has to be my top spot for most surprising moment in either game so far. After Helena, I figured no one was safe, but I was not ready for Bloodwing to be the next to go. With that, I swear my revenge and return to Sanctuary to upgrade Claptrap, officially securing our route through the first barrier. Roland mentions that he has an idea for our next obstacle. I would need to take a note up to the area called 1,000 Cuts and deliver it to someone named the Slab King. The Slab King was apparently part of the raiders originally, but was too brutal to effectively collect intel, so they went their separate ways. Before setting out for 1,000 Cuts though, I want to cheer up my old pal Mordecai, so I head out to the dust to collect some Hodunk booze for him. During this mission, Moxie calls us and mentions that we should bring the booze to her instead. Moxie is an old ex of Mordecai, so I suppose she's just worried about his grieving process. And generally I would agree, but since Bloodwing was one of the OG homies, I brought it back to Mordecai so that we can pour one out together. Mordecai was also looking to get his revenge on the institution that brought about Bloodwing's demise, so he asked us to head back to the wildlife preserve to let the test subject animals free. Keeping track of all the creatures' health was probably the most tricky aspect of this mission, but fortunately after a while I managed to set them all free while also keeping them all alive. With that, hopefully Mordecai will be able to rest a little easier knowing that we drank and murdered our way through the grief. With that out of the way, it's time to finally head over to 1,000 Cuts to recruit the Slab King. Roland and the Slab King may have gone their separate ways previously, but he still owed Roland a favor. Previous allegiances aside though, it was part of the Slab's initiation to test me through combat, so I had to fight my way through a few areas of enemies leading up to the Slab King, which was somewhat time consuming since there was a lot of tanky enemies. This area here was just mostly Goliaths and Brutes, with the occasional buzzard flying around above. When finally making it to the end, it's revealed that the Slab King is none other than our fourth and final playable character from the previous game, Brick. Brick, being the muscle man he is, demands another trial of combat before I could speak with him though, so I'll need to fight off a few waves of enemies of Psychos and Brutes first. Fighting off these waves weren't any more difficult than the previous areas, so after a couple minutes I defeated them all and was able to deliver Roland's note. Our peace talks with Brick end up getting cut short though, because not long after, Jack starts mortar striking Brick's base. Together we push through the waves of robots raining down in the area, making our way towards the mortar beacons. The beacons, however, are shielded, so Brick, using his massive muscles, starts punching the shield while I defended him. Eventually the shields would fall and we would be able to break the beacon. Repeating this 3 more times, we eventually get rid of the beacons and Jack's forces fall back. After helping Brick defend his home, we finalize the alliance and he agrees to meet us all back at Sanctuary. Our next quest takes us to Opportunity. We still need to be a genetic match of Jack in order to get through the next layer of security. Jack apparently has a bunch of body doubles running around his city with devices designed to make them identical to him. Killing one of those doubles would be our next goal. Opportunity was very cool looking, especially since it's nothing like any of the other maps in the game, but it can be very tricky to navigate this area with how many enemies were around. After a bit, I finally tracked down Jack's double and kill him. Fighting him was a bit of a pain because he tended to run away here and there, but he wasn't too strong overall. Picking up the pocket watch that the double dropped, we'll need to configure the voice to match Jack's better, so we take it over to a few info kiosks where we could play it recordings of Jack's voice. After getting the samples, all that was left to do was uploading them to Angel. I had a small bug here where the door for the room wasn't opening. This made me think I was in the wrong area at the time, so I ran around for a while trying to figure out where to go. Eventually I finally just gave up and reloaded the game. Doing this did fix the issue and the door was open when I returned to the area, where I uploaded the files and completed the mission. I probably shouldn't have done this quest first though, since I hung around to do a couple of side quests in the area later, and for that whole time my character's voice sounded like Jack, which was really uncanny. For the next few hours I ended up grinding out most of the side quests I had available, clearing out Opportunity and Lynchwood, as well as a few smaller side quests like the Bane or whatever the bounty board stuff I had available was. By this point my quest journal was pretty clear, so I made my way over to 1,000 Cuts to begin our final push for the key. Turning left away from Slabtown, we start our assault. With all the robots around, I checked my inventory for something corrosive, and only looking at the stats, I equipped the Bane without noticing. When I originally finished the Bane quest, I didn't actually bother checking out the weapon, so the absolute terror that came from subsequently deafening myself is something that will haunt me forever. I pretty much immediately switched to something else. Wish I could say that was the last time I used that gun, but it does come in handy later. Arriving at our first hurdle, I admittedly let my curiosity get the better of me and ran straight through the death wall. It was in fact lethal. Luckily though, I respawned right next to it and Claptrap had disabled it in the meantime, so we were officially through the first of our obstacles. Jack's occasional wisecracks, as he's been doing up until this point, start to sound a bit more nervous here. He definitely doesn't like the fact that we're in the bunker, and that's a good sign of progress, so I push on. There was a lot of opposition at the start, so I'm stuck fighting off the Hyperion forces for a fair bit. Eventually though, I do manage to take them all out, only getting downed a few times in the process. The quantity of enemies here was definitely reminiscent of the final push to the vault in the first game, so I figure at this point we must be approaching the endgame pretty soon. On arrival at the bunker, it's revealed that our slab air support is taking heavy fire from a couple autocannons, so I'll need to take out those quick. There are about 11 autocannons that need to be destroyed. With the amount of stuff going on here, it does get a bit overwhelming, but I managed to take out the first couple autocannons pretty quick. It's around when I get to the final autocannon where I get a bit stuck. Up until this point I was getting all the autocannons from the main platform, so I was under the impression that I had to be in this arena for the fighting and the objectives of the area. So I thought maybe it was just a bug and that I couldn't see the last cannon. After a couple minutes of jumping around, I finally checked to see if I could just leave the platform, and lo and behold, there it is, visible from the lower level. A little bit of a weird choice to make all the turrets visible from the top except for one, but that's also on me for not walking around a bit more, I suppose. Once all the autocannons are destroyed, Jack reveals that the bunker isn't just a building, but it's actually a big flying Hyperion bot as well. The BNK-3R, the greatest defense bot ever built supposedly. Taking off and circling the platform, our battle begins. This fight ends up taking me a good bit of time to do, not because it's really difficult or anything, but the bunker was super tanky. For a fair bit at the start of the fight, I ended up mostly sticking around on the below platform since there was a reasonable bit of cover here and the ship did pass by enough for me to do some damage. After a bit, I got more accustomed to the attacks the bunker had, so I left my safety corner to get more ammo and more actively deal damage, all the while listening for Brick's callouts so that I could dodge the mortar fire and homing rockets. This was definitely the move because not long after I was around 3/4 of the way through the health bar. With only a bit more left to go, I checked to see if I had any more corrosive weapons on me to try and speed things up. Fortunately, the only thing I had that was corrosive was my double-edged sword, the Bane, so sacrificing my ears, I equipped that bad boy and went to town. Worth, because boy did it eat through that health bar. Within seconds, the bunker was destroyed, scattering goodies everywhere. Looting and preparing as much as I could, I readied myself for the final hurdle, Angel's Chambers. The door to Angel's Chambers would only open for a genetic match at Jack and with a voice-activated password. Getting scanned, Angel gives us the password, I love you, and like that, we're through. I was wondering about that password, but I didn't need to wonder long because my questions were answered not long after. Jack was getting increasingly more agitated and unhinged. His previous confident gags was replaced with more anxious and straightforward threats, warning us not to take another step. Angel assures us though that we need to press on, revealing that the Iridium wasn't the only thing needed to charge the key, and that it was actually a siren that was required. The puzzle pieces started to click into place finally. As the elevator reached the bottom, it's revealed that this whole time, Angel was actually Jack's siren daughter that he kept in captivity, used to manipulate his enemies and forcibly charge the key. What a twist. Honestly, did not see this coming till the room password was revealed just before. According to Angel, the only way we get the key back is by destroying her, so reluctantly we begin the battle. We start by firing away at the Iridium pumps going into Angel's cell, but Jack quickly enables the shields and starts sending down his forces to fight back. This is easily the most desperate we've seen Jack this whole game. After a bit of playing defense, Roland finally arrives and lends a hand. From the upper platform, Roland is able to reach the injectors and disable the shield. Knocking down the first shield, we destroy one of the injectors, finally making some offensive progress. There's some really interesting dialogue going on in the background as well, where Jack seems to imply that we're going after his innocent daughter instead of fighting him ourselves. Angel reassures us though that Jack is and always will be a manipulative scumbag, and that he doesn't actually care about anything other than the key. Love the writing and acting for those bits because it really does come off like Jack cares with some of the voice lines, but it's clear that everything he does is in direct contradiction and that it's just his own copium. Fighting alongside Roland, we get started on shield number 2. I get downed a few times during all this, but thankfully I'm able to catch second wins on the enemies nearby, so stay in the fight for the most part. When shield number 2 drops, I destroy the injectors straight away. Unfortunately though, the platforms that let Roland get to the shields was also destroyed in the process, so we can't reach the final injector. Nothing to worry about though, because our hero Lilith is here to help. Teleporting into the arena, she grabs Roland and warps up to the shield panel. From here it's just a bit more playing defense until the shield drops. Thankfully, while Roland is working on the shield this time, we have Lilith in the arena to help us fight the robots. After a few final pleas from Jack, the shields drop and we destroy the final injector. Once the holding cell opens, Angel uses her last breath to call Jack an asshole and dies. This mission was really filled with curveballs because there was no time to celebrate. While speaking with Roland, Jack teleports in and shoots him in the back, killing Roland right in front of Lilith and I. Was not ready for that. I guess previously playable characters aren't safe either? Damn. In a blind rage, Lilith charges Jack, but he slaps on a collar similar to what he used on Bloodwing presumably, and orders Lilith to kill us. Lilith, of course, manages to resist the compulsion and teleports us away instead. Reeling from the loss, I regroup with what's left of the gang back at Sanctuary and start looking at next steps. Jack has the keys still and now has Lilith as a siren substitute for Angel, so it's only a matter of time before the key's done charging. We'll need to figure out where the final vault is and try to intercept them. The only place that'll have that info though is the Hyperion info stockade. Next stop, the Arid Nexus. Unfortunately, the bridge in the Iridium Blight that we need to pass has been fully retracted, so we can't make our way over yet. Brick's solution is simply explosives. His boys can make their own entrance to the stockade, but they would need more firepower first, so diverting our attention, I make my way over to Sawtooth Cauldron. This place is crawling with enemies, but I'll need to power my way through and ascend the Inferno Tower to get the explosives. Ascending the tower is easier said than done though, as they've disabled the elevator up. I'll need to do a bit of running around here, interacting with this and that, until eventually I lure out Mortar, who rides the elevator down to fight us. Admittedly, Mortar absolutely smokes us the first time we meet, but on my second go I make sure to keep my distance and eventually manage to kill him. From there, all that was left to do was take the elevator up and mark the explosive crates for Brick's boys to pick up. Using Brick's explosive expertise, we're finally able to gain access to the Arid Nexus. Once in, the info stockade is right in view. I'll need to do a bit of running around and turning some valves first though. We'll need to build up enough pressure in an iridium pipeline in the area that'll grant us direct access to the stockade. With the pressure built to the max, I catch a ride and ram straight into the pipe, blowing open our entrance. Got nervous here for a sec because it looked like the truck was blocking the hole, but thanks to some sketchy parkour I make it through and enter the stockade. It took me a while to notice at the time, but this location is actually our old starter location from the first game, Firestone. The area changes quite a bit between games since Jack took over and used it as a hub for all of Hyperion's data. There's also some great callback side quests here like Uncle Teddy that takes us back to old TK Baja's place. After a bit of reminiscing, I start making my way over to the stockade. There's a quick encounter with a massive bot named Saturn, but I realized pretty quickly that it wouldn't walk over to where I was, so all I really did was hide behind this pillar and take pot shots at it until it died. From there, I head up to the upper platform where we also have a constructor fight. I employed a similar strat to Saturn where I just crouched down behind some cover and sprayed down that crit spot. All that was left to do was defeating the guard bots and downloading the data, revealing that the location of the final vault was over at a place called Heroes Pass. I made sure to prepare as much as I could at this point. Outside of the slaughterhouse stuff, I pretty much did all the side objectives that I could find, so I was ready to wrap things up once and for all. I tried my best to do the slaughterhouse stuff as well, but the one with the bandits took me forever, and the second one with the Hyperion bots was taking me even longer, so I decided that I wouldn't commit to finishing those since there wasn't really any story content as far as I could tell. The entrance to Heroes Pass is locked, so we'll need to recruit the help of Claptrap again. Meeting up with him at the entrance, we begin the assault finally. There's plenty of opposition here at the front gate, so I'll need to draw the fire away from Clappy while he hacks the door. Of course, it's never simple with Claptrap around though. He more or less immediately triggers a secondary door to close and summons more Hyperion bots for me to take care of. So I end up having my hands full for a bit as he blunders his way through activating more of the defenses. He does eventually start finding his groove though and manages to get the auto turrets to help me out instead of attacking me, so I get a bit of backup at least. After a bit more ducking behind cover and blasting away, I defeat the final wave of badass loaders and secure my way through the main entrance. Entering the next area, I start fighting my way through the goons, focusing on crits as much as possible. My pistol is able to take out most of these guys in just a few hits, so it isn't too much of a struggle. I will say though, the spinny arm loaders and the ion loaders are easily the most annoying. Anything that could block really, those two are just the worst of the bunch in my opinion. Mordecai and Brick also make an appearance and start helping out. Wish I could say that I valiantly charged in alongside the homies, but while Brick was up ahead drawing aggro, I mostly hung back and picked off the stragglers. This did work out pretty well though. I managed to stay in good health while still clearing out the area. There were a lot of exploder bots around here, so it was for the best really that Brick tanked those. I for sure would not have lasted long getting hit with self-destruct back to back. There was another big gate blocking us here, but thankfully Mordecai would be able to circle around in his ship and get a clean shot to disable it. All Brick and I would need to do is hold down the fort in the meantime. All seemed to go smoothly for the most part. After playing a bit of defense, Mordecai gets in position and takes a shot, securing our way further in. Unfortunately though, Mordecai's ship starts taking heavy fire after this, so he yells at us to leave him behind. Brick, being the loyal homie he is, completely ignores Mordecai's wishes though, and jumps to the ship to rescue him. The ship is hit with a lunar strike shortly after though, and ends up sinking into the river of lava below, presumably killing both Brick and Mordecai. I for real thought they died here while playing this part, but it ends up getting revealed later that they both somehow survived all that. All the time I was thinking that maybe they want to wipe the slate clean before the next game, so I fully went into the final fight thinking that Lilith would also die somehow. But no, it was just Roland earlier I guess. Heartbroken by the loss of the first character I played in the franchise, I pushed on to the next area. There was only a bit of fighting left to go. Among the smaller enemies, a few bigger bots like instructors would show up here and there, but I managed to make quick work of them. By this point I was using one of those pistols that gets improved accuracy the more it shoots, easily one of my favorite weapons in the whole game. The accuracy makes it so much easier to hit crits while either ADSing or hip firing, plus the high fire rate absolutely eats through enemies. Eventually I made it past the defenses and arrive at the final chamber. Entering the vault of the warrior, I'm prepared to finally end this once and for all. Entering the arena, we come face to face with Jack. He explains that the key only has a bit more left to go before it's fully charged, but he wanted the pleasure of enacting his revenge himself, so he attacks us, beginning our final showdown. Jack's movesets are a bit like Mirage from Apex. He can turn invisible and make a bunch of hologram clones of himself. The name of the game here is just going to be paying attention to the surrounding area and making sure he doesn't get the drop on me from behind while I'm distracted with his clones. I managed to avoid most of his early attacks while keeping up consistent damage, so it's not long before I get past his shields completely. Around this point, he begins spawning in some of those flying drones to give him shields and support during the fight, but thankfully those drones aren't too strong, so I'm able to destroy them shortly after they spawn in. Around when his shields drop, I also make the switch to my fast fire rate pistol. Hitting him with a bunch of successive crits absolutely annihilates his health bar, beating him super quick. Bloodied and bruised, he doesn't quit though. While we were doing all that, the key finished charging, so he quickly grabs it and activates the Iridium Warrior for the final fight of the game. The battle with the warrior starts off a little overwhelming with all its massive attacks, but I focus on staying out of danger while figuring out how to best deal damage back. The warrior would also summon a few rock and those three-legged rock guys, but thankfully, like the drones earlier, they're pretty weak, so I'm able to kill them as quickly as I notice them. After a bit, we identified that the warrior has a tail smash that hits the center of the arena and a sweeping fire beam that he shoots. So sticking behind cover and avoiding the center of the arena, we managed to avoid most incoming damage during this fight. We also find that the crit spot on the warrior is around his chest, where you can break past some rock slabs for some big damage. With that in mind, it just becomes a matter of doing as much damage as I could each time the warrior rose from the lava. While doing this, I realized that if I hit his crit spot fast enough, I could do enough damage to skip his next round of attacks. So it became a cycle of the warrior rising and submerging back in the lava more than anything. This actually made the fight a lot easier. I pretty much stopped thinking about dodging and just focused on doing damage as quick as I could. And after a few back and forth cycles of this, we officially defeated the warrior and the final boss of the game. Facing Jack in his final moments, Lilith gives us the choice to kill him ourselves or to let her do it. Knowing that she had a past relationship with Roland and what the loss would have done to her, I let her do the honors, putting an end to the reign of Handsome Jack once and for all. Following this is where it's finally revealed that Mordecai and Brick survived as well, as they limp onto the battlefield to share in our victory. All that was left to do at this point was remove the vault key and head home, but while attempting to do so, Lilith activates the key, which shows us a map of space, identifying other vaults on other planets as well, revealing that the Crimson Raiders have plenty of work left to do, thus ending Borderlands 2. I absolutely love this game. They managed to expand on the first game so well without losing any of its charm. The mechanics felt good, the story continued in a believable and fun way, and most of all, it had some amazing characters. I would argue that the first game didn't really have a main villain. We more so had a main objective in terms of finding the vault, and along the way there was plenty of opposition. Having a designated main villain in this one and then having him absolutely steal the show was masterfully done. Having Jack be omnipresent throughout the whole game via the occasional snarky remark on the echo was genius as well. It also really allowed the darker comedy the franchise is known for to shine in a way the first game didn't really have an opportunity to do, and it totally lands for me. This is of course not to say that the game didn't have its flaws here and there, but overall the reputation as one of the better game sequels of all time is well deserved, and I'll happily die on that hill. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, consider hitting like and subscribe. If not, feel free to hit dislike. For now, that's all from me. See you next time, friends.